Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Craig. Craig is a member of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. You will notice Craig's face is blurred. First of all, let's welcome Craig to the show. Thank you for being here. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Let's start. We're going to get into AA, but let's start with why your face is blurred. What's the reason for that?
Anonymity. In Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very important that we protect our anonymity, especially at the public level. It's believed 100% anonymity at the public level. You know, for us in our days of drinking and even after we've recovered from alcoholism, ego can be a big thing, and the last thing we want to do is try to be famous for getting sober. And the way we could do that is at the public level, protect ourselves. It's also important for us to put our principles out there rather than our personalities, so we can be as inclusive as possible. So
no face shown and no last name, so you're Craig.
Yes, thank you.
Alcoholics Anonymous, let's sort of do some background on that. People kind of know what it is, but maybe they don't know the history of AA. It actually wasn't even AA to begin with. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a qualified historian, but I can certainly tell you I have a little bit of experience. And basically, one of the most remarkable things that I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is way back in the days, in the 30s, Bill W. was heading out west on a business venture. And he went out there and he was in a hotel and he was trying to get sober. He was going through another organization for a while and he was trying to get sober, and he was kind of at a crossroad of what to do. Should he go into the bar and drink, or should he pick up the telephone and try to find another alcoholic to help? And what he did was he picked up the telephone, and that's where he met the other co-founder, Dr. Bob W., and that's where the story took off from there. Those guys met each other, they helped each other, and here we are. So.
Yeah, and so basically it started out with someone deciding not to take a drink, but look for support from a fellow individual, basically.
The interesting thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, in my experience, is it's a beautiful paradox because it's not that we forget about our self, but we try to be rid of selfishness. So it's important that we take care of ourselves, but what Bill did and what we try to do to stay sober is help someone else. So we can't keep it unless we give it away, and it's important for us to not necessarily put someone ahead of ourselves, but if we don't help someone else, we can't stay sober. That's our belief. So.
Right, and it's almost like you're not complete, you haven't completed your goal, your task, unless you help somebody else. It's one thing for you to get sober yourself, but obviously the next step is to help somebody else, and there's always going to be someone else that comes along, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, in my experience, I've been sober since 1998. I've been sober for 15 years, and I attribute that to what's called sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous, making myself accessible to the newcomer and to other members of AA, and sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And it's not very complicated. It's very simple. It's just one alcoholic talking to another. So,
before you join AA and get yourself right, you obviously have to identify that you have a problem first. Maybe you realize it. Maybe a family member or a friend does. Maybe it's discovered through work or whatever. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, my personal experience is I started drinking at a very early age. It didn't necessarily do anything to me right away. But as I became a teenager, alcohol started to do something to me, and I fell down in what we call in AA a bottom real quick. Between the age of 17 and 19, I was institutionalized many times, both in treatment centers as well as incarceration, and I hit that bottom, and I became willing to find out what help would look like. But it was through those experiences that I realized I was alcoholic. It's our experience that it's the alcohol that beats us into that reasonableness to try to want to seek help. So.
Yeah, you suddenly get smarter when you hit rock bottom, right? you realize change has to be made.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't say I got smarter. I would just say I became open-minded to my way not working, because my way was definitely not working.
You always hear about people having an intervention, and it works for some people, but not everybody has that experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's what we call in AA a 12-step call, and we go into homes or the park or whatever, the bar room sometimes, and we just try to share experience, strength, and hope with someone who has a drinking problem. But ultimately, and in the history books of AA, there's a picture where two AA members are sitting down with AA member number 3 at the hospital bed, and that's all they're doing. They're just telling them what their drinking was like so that person can identify, and then if they're willing to take the suggestions, get help. So
now, when you say they're willing, so the person, the individual who needs the help, they have to be willing to take that step, right? You can suggest but you know they have to be ready.
Absolutely, and it's a self-diagnosis. You get to diagnose yourself whether you're alcoholic or not, which means you also get to, you know, decide if you have the courage to move forward with change in your life. So,
what does hitting rock bottom mean? It's something different for everybody.
Absolutely, that's a great question. And in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, which I have a copy for you, which you're welcome to, in the back we have stories of different members, and we have a little saying in AA from Park Ave to Park Bench. So we have all different walks of life, and some bottoms are high, some bottoms are low, but really the true definition in my experience of being an alcoholic is not being able to control your drinking, not being able to stop on your own basis. Has nothing to do with the external material things. So.
But it can affect external things
Absolutely.
in your life, friends, family, girlfriend, work, stuff like that. You know?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
And I would imagine it can get expensive, you know. So there's all kinds of things that it disrupts in what would be considered a normal, happy life.
Yes.
For you, you just one day accepted it, right? If your rock bottom, whatever it was, you said it's time. Or were you helped?
Well, you know, that's a great question, and that's the interesting thing about an alcoholic, because his story, in my experience, my story will change a little bit. Maybe I thought I was pushed in, maybe I thought I didn't know, maybe now I realize that I did come into some courage, but the bottom line for me is I hit that rock bottom we're talking about, and I was willing to take some suggestions. And I had a certain therapist and a probation officer that wanted to send me away and help me get help, and that's what I did. And when I went into the rooms of AA, they were there for me. And I got into what's called our 12 steps and got a sponsor and got involved in my home group and service, and all of those things have kept me connected and involved.
So let's talk about, because that's another thing that when people hear about AA, they hear about the 12 steps. So let's get a little bit more into what the 12 steps are.
Sure. I mean, that's Alcoholics Anonymous Program of Recovery. And obviously, we don't mandate, there's no membership rules in AA. We don't ask anybody or tell somebody what to do. But it is our shared experience to go through these principles, these 12 steps, and to find a power outside of ourselves that can help us with our alcoholism. In my experience, I mean, my drinking was a huge phenomenon, so I had to find an even bigger phenomenon to help me with that, and that just happened to be that power outside of myself.
So when you talk about 12 steps, are the initial ones like a little bit easier as you're just getting yourself started? And what is that compared to like step number 12 and
wow.
all that?
I mean, that's a great question, actually. And sitting here knowing that I've been through that process of 12 steps, I don't know how to answer that, except they're all probably the hardest things I've ever done.
Each one individually, you know, and you don't try to like make it a daunting task, I would imagine, right? Just take one step at a time, just get through step one, and then move on from there.
Well, they kind of flow, and again, each member has their own experience, and I just want to make sure I finish what my initial statement was. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most gratifying, and I certainly don't want anyone to be intimidated by them. It was just because my ego was so big, and my delusion was so big, and for an alcoholic, what I want to do is I want to stop drinking, and I think just my life is going to be perfect. But I came to realize by going through those steps that I had a lot of spiritual change I needed to make. So,
was your ego? Did you have an ego despite alcohol, or was that what made it grow, your ego?
Well, I don't know. That's probably an ongoing debate, but I can assure they're associated. What I do know is if I don't keep my ego in check, there's a good chance that I can go back to drinking.
Let's talk about everyday life for you now. Are you able to sit down and watch TV, watch the Super Bowl, see all those commercials come on, you know, Budweiser, whatever, and just be cool? I mean, or is that a struggle for you?
I haven't obsessed over a drink since I've been through those steps in early sobriety. I only go into a full-blown bar room or a drinking situation when necessary.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, if a family member is getting married, the goal of AA is to allow us to enjoy our life, so we can go there. Obviously, in early sobriety, there were some suggestions my sponsor gave me so I don't put myself in a bad situation.
To avoid the temptation.
Yeah,
right?
But there's freedom. We're talking about freedom in AA. So, yeah, I went to a Super Bowl party. We had a great time. And
a guy could be sitting next to you having something, and you could have a Diet Coke, and everything is okay?
Yeah, I prefer a tonic water with lime, but but yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Yes, we can be free of it.
Just like you can go to a restaurant or, you know, lounge bar restaurant and order food, and somebody else can, like you said, if you're going to somebody's wedding, they're going to partake and, you know, tip their champagne glass, and you're still going to be able to be a part of the festivities and live a normal life.
Yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous does host businessmen and stuff of the like, and sometimes for their jobs they have to go into these situations, and that's why the steps are so important for me, because it puts me in a good spiritual condition to be able to do that stuff. So.
As far as the 12 steps go, the length of time it takes to get through them, I would imagine completely different for each individual, right?
Yes.
You know, quicker for one person, longer for another, but the point is to actually be able to get through them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
get on with your life.
Yep. The only thing I found I need is willingness. I mean, recovery begins in AA when you talk to another alcoholic. It's not very complicated. It's one of the most simple and powerful things I've ever experienced.
When you say talk to another alcoholic, are you in a group setting and you stand up and that kind of thing, or how does it work?
Well, as far as, I mean, there's many different styles of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. At my home group, we have 23 meetings a week. We have several different meetings in a church basement. And yeah, you raise your hand if you want to share and stuff. But what I was talking about specifically is when you, after the meeting, go to the diner, or when you meet with your sponsor, or if you get a phone call, talking with an alcoholic personally.
Right.
But of course, the meetings, you get a very similar experience from listening to people share and stuff of that sort. So.
What kind of a feeling or an experience is it when everybody else in the room is going through the exact same thing that you're going through in their own way, but you all have the same issue that you're working through, and, you know, obviously together making it a little bit easier for everybody?
Unity and power. I mean, no matter where you come from, what you look like, what your story is, you come together. I mean, alcoholism it'll affect everybody. It'll affect everybody. So we come together to help each other survive. So it's powerful.
Yeah. So how does it work where you get an individual, like a sponsor? How does that work where you get set up with a sponsor? Are you just assigned someone, or do you kind of pick someone that you feel comfortable with, or maybe you've developed some kind of rapport with?
Well, what I did when I came in, and I found it very hard to trust people in general,
right.
So it took me a little bit of time, but I paid attention to what certain men were saying and kind of saw how they were living. Obviously, I didn't hire a private investigator or anything,
right.
But I watched in my experience with them how they reacted. I got some of their phone numbers. I communicated with some of them. And then when I felt comfortable, I asked somebody, you know, can you explain sponsorship to me, and can you help me, you know, stay sober. So that was my experience with it. So.
Right. And there's women involved in AA too?
Of course, yeah. I just said men specifically because,
right.
You know, for me, I needed a male sponsor. But yeah, there's men and women in AA. And,
alcoholism doesn't, you know, discriminate based on gender. Certainly, you know, everybody can be afflicted the same way. We'll get into a lot of stuff, but just jumping ahead to today, how do you feel? How's your life?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody has it better than me, and I certainly don't mean that in an arrogance. I just mean every day I wake up understanding where I came from. I really could never honestly complain about anything, because where I was, and the most important thing in my life is peace of mind, and I have it. There is nothing. I spent my life when I was afflicted with this in full-blown capacity doing nothing more than thinking about alcohol. And I'm free from that, which gives me the opportunity to do anything. So. And
that's a great way to take a break. Craig, who is a member of AA, you'll notice that his face is blurred, is because that's the philosophy and the policy of not kind of bringing notoriety to, you know, and being famous for it. You want to talk about the affliction itself, right? And that's
the principle, yeah.
Right. Do you know the website off the top of your head?
Yes, I do. It's www.ct-aa.org.
All right. Let's take a break and come back. We'll chat with Craig, member of AA, in just a little bit. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Craig. He is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You'll see his face is blurred. And explain again the reason for that is because you want to avoid notoriety. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Again, it's important for us to be able to allow anybody that wants to come to AA to feel safe with their problem and to not get involved in the notoriety or the ego or the fame and talk about the principles of AA, not the personalities.
Right. That's excellent. One of the things I wanted to get into, we talked about the type of organization AA is and the type of individual that may want to get involved in it. One of the things was you don't necessarily need, it's not a religious thing. You know, these are tools to get you well. Religion, regardless, you don't have to be religious. You can if you want, but it's no kind of requirement or anything mandatory. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with one of our steps, which is step 2, it came to believe in a power greater than ourselves. My experience is we can choose our own conception of God in AA, or in some cases, not choose any. And that's the great thing about AA is it's all inclusive. If you have a problem with alcoholism, that's the only requirement for membership. If you feel like you have a problem drinking, come on in and get some help. And who you believe or what you believe, or even if you don't believe, is okay. And to me, that's pretty powerful.
Right. It doesn't matter. You can be as religious or as non-religious, or some people prefer the term spiritual. Maybe that's not religion. Whatever you want. Whatever gets you through it, basically, yes. Right? And I'm sure there are some people who are religious, that helps them. I want to talk a little bit more about the meetings themselves, because it's not if anybody is not familiar with how AA works, they may have a picture in their mind of a group of people sitting around talking, sharing their experiences, which is part of it, but maybe there are other kinds of meetings too, more one-on-one, like you were talking about with a sponsor. Talk about the different kinds of meetings there are.
Well, the registered meetings, the meetings you would find on the website we gave, or the schedule book, those are what are called AA groups or AA meetings. Mm-hmm. And what happens there is a group of alcoholics, 2, 3, 20, 200, whatever it might be, will get together and they'll share their experience, strength, and hope, and talk about how they recover from alcoholism. And then there's when you meet with a sponsor or something, that's not an AA meeting, but that's part of your own personal growth in sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous.
Are you, at this point, somebody else's sponsor now? Have you gotten to that point yet?
I've had the honor and the privilege of sponsoring men, yeah.
What is that like when you become the person to help somebody else? Not only have you gone through the program and you've gotten your life right, but now, we talked about this earlier, the next step is to help somebody else. What is that experience like? Just
an unbelievable honor and a privilege. And the interesting thing, like I talked earlier about the paradox, is that sponsee, that person I'm quote-unquote helping, is actually helping me more than I'm helping them. That's the way it works in AA. So I'm going to answer the phone if somebody needs to talk. I'm going to be there if they want help, if someone wants to go through the steps.
Have they needed you? I mean, has there been a point where you needed to kind of talk them in or out of a situation that they kind of were teetering one way or the other?
Again, it's interesting answering those questions because I always need them as a sponsor in AA. But yes, I try to be available to what they need. It's the interesting paradox, and anyone who's watching this who's in my shoes understands that. Like it's a gift to be able to sponsor somebody. It's a gift. We get a lot out of it. It's what helps us stay sober.
Right. And there's the helping part, because it's a domino effect. You get well, and then you start, helping. And not just one other person. You could eventually sponsor somebody else too. Correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's an amazing feeling, I would imagine. If someone is watching this show, feels that they may have a problem, or is just looking for a meeting to go to, is the website one of the ways, or the phone number one of the ways that they just find out what's close to them?
Yeah, I mean, the telephone number that's on the screen is one option for people to call and get to a meeting. To go to the website that we mentioned, www.ct-a.org, is another way. A lot of different ways to come into the meeting and find out, if you want to get help for your alcohol problem. So
is that usually how it works? Does somebody, aside from what we talked about earlier, where you discover that you hit rock bottom, but then there's always the option of somebody involved in your life, whether it's work, family, friend, to get you involved. But can someone just kind of out of the blue decide they see something like this and they say, well, I'm going to at least investigate and see what it's all about? You get people that will kind of come in, maybe not necessarily are full on board with it, but just kind of want to get the feel of what's going on before they decide that they want to jump in, so to speak?
Yeah, we do. We get people that come to Alcoholics Anonymous to find out if they're alcoholic or not. And we also get people in the medical profession that will come to our open meetings to find out what AA is and what it isn't, and whether or not they want to send their clients there. And a lot of us come to AA not always from an AA member 12-stepping them. Maybe our lawyer or our psychiatrist or our teacher or our guidance counselor will recommend we check out an AA meeting. And there's a lot of service that's done in AA, and there's people in AA that talk to those professionals and let them know what AA is and what it isn't. So
you said somebody will come in to find out if they're an alcoholic or not. Is there a simple definition for determining whether someone is an alcoholic, or does it depend on the individual? What is an alcoholic? Is it when your life is disrupted? Is when it becomes a medical concern? What is it?
Again, what we talked about earlier, it's self-diagnosis. I mean, for me, it was the fact that I had no control over alcohol. And when I ingested alcohol, I didn't know when I was going to stop. And when I was drinking, I was already thinking about the 7th or 8th drink. And as you mentioned too, some outside things and material things were affected. But each individual has to consult their own conscience on that question. But once they feel they're alcoholic, then they can decide whether or not they want what AA has to offer. So,
when you are, you know, free and clear and able to get on with your life, I know it's always a struggle every day, even after you've gone through the steps. But at this point in your life, do you feel outside pressure? I mean, is it a battle every day for you? Or are you so much beyond that where you can sit at a Super Bowl party like we talked about and not feel the effects of it? What is it? What is life like? Are there pressures coming in from all sides?
Well, I mean, life is
society.
Yeah, sure. Life. I'm a human being like everyone else in this world, and life is not always a struggle. In fact, life is incredibly enjoyable on many occasions. But I'm not immune to being human. So yeah, I have the same pressures that any human being has. But I feel gifted that I have those spiritual principles in my life that alcoholism brought me to. So I never thought I'd say it when I was new, but I'm grateful to be alcoholic because it put me in touch with some tools that I might not have otherwise came in touch with.
Yeah, you can kind of almost be on a higher level spiritually by what you've gone through and maybe become a better person for it.
Well, I'm laughing now because we have this term in AA where we call it spiritual kindergarten. So I would never call myself on a higher level, but I certainly try to be on a higher level than I was. But yeah, it's great. It's great.
What do you say to somebody who might be, you know, teetering or thinking that they might be? What is their first step? Is it to call the number, go to the website? What's the first step for them if they have the question in their mind?
Wow. I mean, again, that answer can vary, and it's a great question. But I believe once you're willing, you're going to try to get help with your alcoholism. And for me, in my own experience, which is all I can offer, was I had to be beaten pretty bad before I was going to be willing to take any help. So, but I mean, if somebody wants questions, if somebody wants answers and questions, they can call. The information's available.
We mentioned the website, and you mentioned it too. What is on there for people to go and see? What's the website all about?
Well, there's a wide variety of things. There's things for the members, particularly, you know, certain events and stuff. There's things for the professionals to get information about AA. There's meeting lists if you want to find out where the meetings are in any town in Connecticut, the time, the day, the location, what kind of meeting it is. So there's all that kind of stuff on there. It talks about what our steps are in there. What our 7 tradition is, which has to do with there are no dues or fees in AA. Yeah,
that's something that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's important. If somebody maybe is thinking about being involved but wondering if they can afford it, you can afford it.
Yeah, there's like we said earlier, there's no membership rules. We are self-supporting. Obviously, we do have to pay rent to hold a meeting and stuff of that sort, but that all comes from our own individual members' contributions. But there is no requirement that when you come in, you have to put anything. I mean,
there's going to be situations where someone might be not as financially well off, especially if they're struggling in other aspects of their life too. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, over the years, I've contributed different amounts when the basket's passed to try to help my home group stay alive. It varies. So.
You know, you in the beginning of the show today, you talked about the history of AA. I'm not sure if we mentioned that AA is celebrating worldwide its 75th anniversary.
Next year will be its 80th.
80th?
Next year will be its 80th
wow.
anniversary, yes. And there will be an international convention in Atlanta, Georgia, and to help celebrate that. And it's a big thing. But in many ways, we still have a lot to learn. But yeah,
it's a constant evolving process, isn't it?
Yeah, and you mentioned the anonymity. We have a new challenge right now in AA because social media.
And I was just going to ask you that. Is AA involved in social media as far as, you know, getting the word out? And as far as support groups, you could probably go on Facebook for support groups, or is that something that you would avoid?
Well, Alcoholics Anonymous states its definition very clearly. We're our own organization. We're not affiliated with anybody or anything. We do cooperate. We do have online meetings. There are certain online meetings and stuff.
Just because that's the technology today, you're capable of doing it.
Yeah, we don't have a Facebook page or anything of that sort.
Because of the anonymity.
I mean, that maybe. I can't speak for everybody in AA why we don't, but that could potentially be it. But yeah, it's to navigate within the social media is different than it was obviously back in the day. So.
Yeah, it's a big deal now. Before we wrap it up, one more time on the website for people to go and learn more, and maybe give out the phone number too.
Sure, it's www.ct-a.org, and it's 1-866-STEPS-12.
Craig, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous himself, you know, I appreciate you coming on. It takes courage, and we understand the reason for the blurring of the face, but that's what you do. You share your experiences, and hopefully you're helping some other people in the process. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. In the meantime, I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.